Sciutto, and I've been an actor for, well, a really long time.
Here's my number. Call me.
I've worked with some of the most famous people in Hollywood.
Anything unusual occur?
Define unusual. And taken on some roles I'd rather forget. Now my industry friends join me with their stories of faking it, making it, and taking it in Hollywood.
And now, here's Nellie.
Welcome to 50 Moments, Faking It, Making It, and Taking It in Hollywood as a Working Actor. I'm Nellie Sciutto, and my co-host today is Chris Yates. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Of course. And, I always like to relate the podcast to a chapter of my book. And so today, Chris is a content creator, so he understands how it is to be on the spot when you're working, right?
Correct, yeah.
So I always think about comedy when I think about being on the spot. And I've done a lot of stand-up comedy. I was not very good at it. And but I did do a lot of comedy festivals, and I got to work with Bob Odenkirk and all kinds of very famous comedians. And I have a funny story to tell about it. But first, let's introduce Chris. So, Chris, you do content, and you know what it's like to be on your toes, correct?
Yeah, Nellie, I've been doing content since the 90s, and I was first in television, sports anchor, reporter, producer, editor. So I know all that stuff, and I did that for, 15 years. But then I noticed a shift in the way people consume content. It was social media and digital media. So I started really focusing on that, and that's where the future is, and that's where it is now. I mean, the thing is, though, people always ask me, how did you figure out this digital media? And I said, well, nothing's really changed. The only thing that's changed is the channel. So as long as you're a great storyteller, you create great content, you can do it at any platform. So it doesn't matter if it's TV or digital or social, it's all the same.
Well, it's interesting because I always think about going live and, working in comedy. My first stand-up experience was I did Pretty Funny Women in Hollywood with Chelsea Handler and all these comedians. And they were so inviting and welcoming to me. And then I had to stand up and do my stand-up, and nobody laughed at all. And I remember thinking, just get through this 5 minutes. And afterwards, nobody would talk to me because I was so bad. And that's when I realized, okay, it's better to write. I'm a better storyteller. Let's stick to that.
That's
funny. Doing the comedy festivals was so fun for me because they were scripted. It was scripted material, which was better for me. But I have a funny story. My dad came to see me in the Aspen Comedy Festival, which was like, Monty Python was doing a reunion. Chris Farley was there. It was an SNL reunion. It was like a big cast and crew.
Nice.
And we got to go see different people. And I said to my dad, who do you want to see? And he said, I love Rob Reiner. I want to see him. So being a performer, we got to sit in the second row. And we're sitting in the second row, and midway, I didn't know Rob Reiner would be so long-winded, but he was. And midway through, I'm like, my dad's like, I gotta go to the airport. So we're in the middle of in this theater, in the middle seat. And we had to scooch by everybody to get out. So we do, and as we stand up, Rob Reiner's like, hey, where are you guys going? 2,000 people in the audience. And I'm like, hey, Rob Reiner, we love seeing you. But my dad's got to the airport. And he's like, I don't believe that's your dad. You guys are going back to the hotel to have private time.
Oh, my God.
And I'm like turning red with my father there. Obviously, I'm like, this is my father. It's my father. But, talk about being on your toes. And
Oh, you have to. That's live. That's what's great about live. The thing I like live better than just creating videos on the side and then editing them later, there's a lot more energy in live than there is just filming something and cutting it later. You feel it. I mean, I feel it right now,
Yes.
It's just something about being live that has a lot more energy.
Well, that's one of the reasons I miss the sitcom. There really aren't many sitcoms anymore, like a 5-camera sitcom. And when I was doing those, like Murphy Brown and all kinds of shows, basically they had 5 cameras and it was a live audience, and there would be a warm-up guy, and they would change the lines last minute, and I kind of loved the last minute thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of that, today we're going to interview my friend and colleague, Melinda Reid, who had a show called Talk of the Desert in Palm Springs, where she interviewed all kinds of celebrities living in Palm Springs, which is really Hollywood East. So Melinda, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Nellie. And Chris, nice to meet you over the podcast.
Nice to meet you, too.
Why don't you tell us how you started your show first, and then I'll dig into the questions.
And went to the Mrs. International pageant in '96, representing our beautiful state of California.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a TV show that I had been hosting and producing, and it was absolute blast. I was so blessed to have so many fantastic guests. I had Carol Channing 3 times, Leah Iacocca, Rich Little, Dick Van Dyke 3 times. Oh man, what a great interview he was. Tony Orlando, Barbara Sinatra many times, because we were talking about the Barbara Sinatra Children's Center at Eisenhower Medical Center. And of course, the Frank Sinatra Golf Tournament that was a fundraiser for the Barbara Sinatra Children's Center. And Ruta Lee, it was just multiple guests. And Tony Orlando has got to be one of my favorite people in the whole world. He's retiring. Sure, he's retiring. I think he's going to be traveling and performing so much that he's going to be back.
So, Melinda, you are kind of a staple in Palm Springs now, and I understand you just got a star on the Palm Springs Walk of Fame.
Well, I was very honored to be asked by the Palm Springs Walk of Stars committee to be recognized as a Palm Springs area resident and mover and shaker, I guess. And anyway, so I received my star on the Palm Springs Walk of Stars in 2006. I was star number 254. I think they're up to almost 600 stars now. And I had to decide where I wanted to put my star. So I have diabetes since I was 3.5 years old, and I take 4 injections a day, but it's kept me healthy, never been back in the hospital for the diabetes. And so walking down the street, and there was See's Candy. And I thought, what a perfect place for a person with diabetes to have their star in front of See's Candy. So that's where it is.
Which I love. And by the way, I can picture that See's Candy in Palm Springs. I've been there. I know where it is.
Yes. Well, sadly, just about 6 months ago, See's Candy moved out of there, and they put some kind of a drink shop in, some kind of healthy drink shop. So I just walked by there a couple of weeks ago, and I thought, oh, well, at least it was a decent store they put in place of See's Candy. But
well, instead of like an Ozempic shop, which which is all the rage right now.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. But anyway.
Well, let me tell you something.
Yeah, but it was an absolute honor to be honored there with the Palm Springs Walk of Stars, with all the celebrities that are there in Palm Springs that have been honored with a star.
So Chris Yates and I we're family friends. Our families are close, et cetera. And whenever we get together, we love Frank Sinatra, and we listen to Frank Sinatra all the time. And Frankie, your husband who passed away, was good friends with Frank Sinatra. Is that right?
Yes, they met at Jilly's in New York when Frankie was performing there. I think Frankie was 23, and he told me that he was playing piano and singing, and all of a sudden, this whole group of people walked into Jilly's, and he thought, who is that? Then he realized it was the Frank Sinatra. And so he stopped singing, but still played piano. And Jilly came over to him and said, Frankie, why have you stopped singing? And Frankie says, well, Frank Sinatra is here. And Jilly told him, oh, Frankie, Frank's going to love you. Just keep singing and doing what you're doing. And by the end of the evening, they were sitting next to each other at the piano. And Frankie's first song with Frank Sinatra was Where or When.
I know that your husband talked about Sinatra. Oh man, awesome, incredible that y'all got to know him. But you also mentioned some that I find very unique, that he introduced Sinatra to New York, New York. Kind of tell me that story.
Okay. Yes. Frankie was performing in a restaurant in downtown Palm Springs. Now, this is many, 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 many moons ago. And Sinatra and his gang of friends came in to see Frankie perform. And Frankie did the song New York, New York. And Frank called him over to the table after the show was over and said, Frankie, I've never heard that song, New York, New York. I really like it. And Frankie says, of course you've heard the song. It was in the movie with Liza Minnelli. And Frank says, I don't remember the song at all. So he had Frankie bring the music to his house the next day. And Frank really loved it. And he was going in for a recording session, I believe, the next day into LA. And he gave the music to Frank, and he took it in. And Vincent Falcone, Frank's conductor at the time, they recorded that song, and the rest is history. I mean, even on New Year's Eve in New York City's playing New York, New York by Frank Sinatra, and that would not have happened if it wasn't for Frankie Randall.
That's incredible.
That's incredible, and also
Unbelievable.
being a New Yorker, I've heard it all my life. It was at my wedding, like it's such an
He should have
iconic
gotten
song.
royalties for that.
Exactly.
And yeah, exactly. But I don't think that happened. So anyway, I wish Frankie could have gotten more credit for that, but I did have him. I think there were 4 or 5 of Frank's friends at this dinner, and as they're all gone. Well, now they're all gone,
Mm-hmm.
but before the last one passed away, I had Frankie get a letter from that gentleman to confirm that this is correct. And so that gentleman sent the letter to Frankie to confirm that this is what happened. And anyway, so it's very cool that Frankie Randall had the input and acknowledgement, and that got Frank singing New York, New York.
No, that's amazing.
That really is unreal.
It really is. And Frankie Randall, not Frank Sinatra, introduced me and my husband and my son to some of the great old comedians like Shecky Greene and Henny Youngman at the golf club in Palm Springs, which was so much fun. And we were just talking about comedy earlier. So, I tried to think of the comedy greats, and I wondered, did you ever interview on your show any of the comedy greats?
Well, yeah, talking about Shecky Greene, I sure did. I think I had him on my show a couple of times. And sometimes it was difficult to interview him because he had his own way of doing things. But, we just lost Shecky about 4 months ago?
Yes, I texted you.
I was at his memorial service in Las Vegas. So that was really, but I think he made 98 or something like that.
That's a good life. We all hope for that.
One of the stories about Shecky Greene is he was performing, I'm not sure what hotel right now, but he pulled up in front of Caesar's Palace. Now, this is years and years and years ago when Caesar's had the fountains in front of the hotel, and you could drive through the front door area there. And he drove into the fountains. And the doorman comes running out and says, "Mr. Greene, are you okay?" And Shecky says, "Oh, I want wax and make sure you get my back windows clean." Anyway, Shecky was an absolute character. But also, Frankie worked a lot with Pete Barbuti. And I don't know if you remember Pete or not, but Frankie put a show on called That's Italian.
Yes.
And all of the performers were Italian.
Mm-hmm.
Pete Barbuti being one, and Dean Martin's daughter, and oh goodness, they're all gone now except for Dina.
Mm-hmm.
And we even had Jerry Vale at one time performing. I say we performing with the show That's Italian. But we traveled the country with that show, and it was a phenomenal reception. And the boys had a great time. Dina had a great time, but because if the entertainers have fun on stage, the audience has fun with the entertainers.
Agreed.
Let me ask you this.
Good.
So, it sounds like you've interviewed and met a lot of famous people. If you had to put one at the top of the list who you were fascinated by, who was very interesting, who would it be?
Well, I've interviewed so many fantastic people, but I really have to tell you, one of my favorite interviews, and goes back a long ways, was Jack LaLanne, the exercise guy.
Oh, that would be
And
great.
I didn't. Yeah, well, he was on television for 35 years.
Wow.
Doing his exercises way before it was the cool thing to do. And my crew never pulled up chairs around where we were videotaping the show on any of my guests except for Jack LaLanne, because he was so fascinating and so encouraging and so positive. But I mean, I can't. How do you compare Carol Channing and Leah Cola Lee Iacocca, I can't even say his name, Lee Iacocca, and Dick Van Dyke. I mean, I can't believe, first of all, that I met these people, and second, that I got to interview them, and several times.
Yeah, well, I would say Jack LaLanne would be interesting, just because he started a whole industry. Really,
He
like
sure
you
did.
said, nobody was doing that before. Nobody, you know, he was like the big armed man long before everybody else was, you know?
Yes. And he and his wife were so sweet. In fact, I was emceeing events for the Desert Diabetes Club at Eisenhower Medical Center for 20 years. And Jack was one of our guest speakers. And he picked his wife up on the stage and carried her around. I mean, my goodness, Jack must have been 75 or 80.
Yes.
And picked her up and carried her around the stage. The audience just was cracking up.
Okay, so other people you've interviewed, is there anybody who just was hilarious? One of your funniest guests?
Oh, so many of them, because I let them be themselves. My attitude on hosting Talk of the Desert was that I was not the star of the show. My celebrity guest was the star of the show. I was the facilitator, and I led them down the ways that I needed them to go, and I had the timing, and I had to break for commercials and all of that. And but everybody was, I had so many people tell me, you know, I've never told anybody this before, because I think they felt comfortable with me, and that they knew I was, that nothing was going to be edited, basically. I mean, but there was some, you know, mishaps every once in a while, but they just had a great time with me. And I also think, somebody asked me what was the biggest thing I did about hosting Talk of the Desert, was I listened. And listen to what the celebrity guests had to say.
That's key.
That
That is crucial when you interview people. It's funny, my wife is always saying, same thing, how do you get people to open up and talk to you? I said, well, I listen. And she always says, well, you don't listen at home. I said, well, here, all you got to do is put a camera behind me, and I'll listen to you all day long. And if I interview you, I'm listening. But other than that, I can't hear you.
Chris, have you tried that recently?
I need to. And I'll be the best husband listener of all time.
Maybe you'll win an award, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, Melinda, you have been such a great guest, and I want to ask you, can you tell our audience how they can listen to your work, et cetera?
Well, I've been off the air for about 5 years now.
But it must be somewhere.
Well, yes, but I am on YouTube.
Yes.
Not all of my episodes, but Talk of the Desert .tv is my website, although it's not been updated recently. I'm sorry. When Time Warner changed and was purchased by Spectrum. Spectrum eliminated all of its local producers, and so that was kind of sad. But I did do over 600 episodes of Talk of the Desert. But some of them are on YouTube, and they're on my website, talkofthedesert.tv, not .com, .tv. And so there's still some things out there. Oh, I got to interview Liesl from The Sound of Music. And she didn't do very many interviews.
Yeah.
And I think I had almost 2,000 hits on her interview on YouTube, which I thought was fine with me. I was happy about that. But she's been gone for quite a number of years now.
Did you get her to talk about her affair with Christopher Plummer?
No, we don't. Talk of the Desert was not that way.
I know. I'm just fascinated by Liesl too, so I can understand why you got so many hits. I was always fascinated by her. Beautiful and talented, you know.
Her name's Charmian Carr.
Yes, yeah, she has a beautiful name.
I had to wipe the cobwebs out of my brain, you know.
Did your husband also introduce her to Sound of Music like Sinatra?
Oh, yes. No, I don't think so.
No, that would be Gershwin, right?
I'm not sure that Frankie and she met, because I was in studio doing her interview. So.
Yeah. Well, listen, everybody needs to check that out, because if you're interested in Hollywood like we all are, you know, it would be great to look up your YouTube channel and just listen to your interviews, because, you know, they're so telling, and you had so many of the best guests on ever.
Well, I really appreciate that. I love doing it, and I'd like to get back on the air. All I really need is sponsors.
Well, good. And in the meantime, people can check it out on YouTube. So,
yes.
Melinda, thanks so much for being on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. And all the best on this adventure on the podcast. And I'm very excited for you, Nellie. And thank you for including me in this. And I mean, there's so many other guests that have been so important to my life. And anyway, but thank you so much. And Chris, nice meeting you. And
Nice
all the best
meeting you.
with your project.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for being on.
Okay.
You had some interesting stories to tell.
Yeah. So that was interesting. It's interesting to talk to people about because she's interviewing people live as well, just like we are.
Yeah.
That was what I wanted to talk about today. And I'm so glad you were on the show, Chris. And that's been another episode of 50 Moments, faking it, making it, and taking in Hollywood as a working actor. And we'll catch you next time.
For information on my book, check out nelliesblog.com, and I'm on all social media platforms. Just search for Nellie Sciutto.